part of the basics of pacemaker. So the topics which I will be covering will be the guideline-based indications for pacing and some pacemaker-mediated tachycardia and something about leadless pacemakers. So yesterday we have stopped with the modes of biventricular pacing, dual chamber pacing. So I put in a picture from Braunwald. Actually, this shows almost all the intervals and refractory period, blanking period, etc., which we have discussed yesterday. You can go through this picture. And going into the guidelines, actually, this is taken from the latest ESC guidelines. Latest in some 2014 or 15 somewhere. So what we see is most of the times the first choice pacemaker is always dual chamber. It will always be DDD. So the basic indications for pacing will be either, most of the times it will be either a sinus node disease or an AV block, which is again divided into persistent and intermittent. The separate indications for which I will be discussing in the next few pages. So whenever we see that except when the patient is having persistent AV block along with an atrial fibrillation, wherein the choice of pacemaker will be VVIR, because when the patient is having atrial fibrillation, whenever you try to pace the atria, it might go into 1:1 conduction and might land up with a tachy and will go into fast ventricular rates. So other than that, you remember that whenever, except for AF, whenever whatever disease, whether it is sinus node or AV node or persistent or intermittent, whether chronotropic competence is there or not, the first choice will be DDD. And in sinus node disease, for both, the second choice will be AIR and AAI. In chronotropic incompetence, we are giving a rate modulated pacing. And in AV block also, whether if there is persistent or intermittent, if there is sinus node dysfunction or no sinus node dysfunction, you go in with the first choice of DDDR or DDD. Second choice will be DDD or VDD respectively. And even if it's an intermittent AV block, the first choice will be DDD only. AVM is nothing but AV delay management. As we have seen, AV delay management is nothing but adjusting the AV delays and giving some extra time for the ventricle to come up with its own intrinsic beat, so that we are giving a chance for the ventricle to recover and show that it is still functioning, instead of going and without waiting and pacing it all through. So I have just this table, just for theory's sake, tells about some causes of rapid ventricular pacing, which most commonly can be divided into ventricular pacing at upper rate limit in DDD mode, maybe most commonly or very commonly due to pacemaker mediated tachycardia or ventricular tracking of rapid atrial cycle, which I have told, whenever the atrial tachy or fast ventricular rate occurs, it might track 1:1. And this actually we have already seen some safety maneuvers or safety methods wherein the AV node or the ventricular pacing will change itself depending on the total atrial refractory period. So whenever the heart rate goes fast beyond a particular limit, a particular P will come inside the TARP interval. So based on how many beats, once the P wave comes inside the TARP interval, it can go either into a ventiback sort of thing, or it can directly go into a 2:1 AV block sort of thing, depending on the heart rate, depending on the rate of the atrial tachycardia, so as to protect the ventricular from fast ventricular rate, which in turn will protect from decreased cardiac output or mitral regurgitation, etc. So the tracking will be most commonly because of either an atrial tachy or rapid oversense signals. Yesterday we have seen that a particular electrode might see something else and think that it is intrinsic, and it might either, if it is in triggered mode, it can go into a faster faster pacing. So other causes will be a sensor driven pacing or magnet application. Yesterday I have already told you that there is something called as a magnet rate for each company pacemaker, and depending on the longevity also the magnet rate varies. For example, immediately after implantation of a pacemaker, magnet rate will be different, and if it is nearing the end of life, the magnet rate will be different, sort of diagnostic algorithm. And it might be due to rate smoothing algorithms. These are all that prevent abrupt changes in ventricular rate. So going separately into the indications for pacing in each condition. First will be the indications for pacing in patients with persistent.
Praveen, 1 minute. Can you just see the previous slide?
Yeah, tell man.
This thing, magnet application, it will cause tachycardia, or it will be the whatever the rate, it will be always within normal limit. No?
And
Does it
usually, whenever you apply a magnet, the pacemaker will go into asynchronous mode.
Which will be rate will be around? Magnet rate
50, 60, 70, whichever is set for that this thing.
Okay.
Rarely because of some algorithm malfunctions, magnet application can go into rapid ventricular pacing.
Okay,
Means actually sometimes, yes, rare. Actually, sometimes to some types of pacemaker mediated tachycardia, you will try applying a magnet to prevent it from pacing. So normally it won't occur. These are all rarer causes. For such a thing to occur, many things has to fall in place, like the refractory period, the excitability of the tissue at that particular rate. Everything has to fall in place. Then it might go into a tachy.
Okay, ventricular tracking means fault sensing by the ventricles and firing as per the atrial
ventricular tracking is nothing but atria fires at a particular rate. So ventricle starts the AV node, or in a dual chamber pacemaker, the ventricular lead starts pacing 1:1. Means if atrial tachycardia occurs and atria goes into 200 beats per minute, then ventricle it will start pacing at 200 beats per minute. So to protect that only, we have seen that whenever P wave goes into TARP, the 1:1 tracking is inhibited. So to protect the ventricles. So at lesser than a particular normal range of values, it will be 1:1 conduction. When the atria rate goes above a particular value, it will be Venki back. And once it crosses a particular limit, then it will be 2:1 AV block.
Okay.
Okay, now. So going into indications of pacing in patients with persistent bradycardia, it might, again, as we have seen, it will be mostly be due to sinus node dysfunction or AV block. So the class 1 indications are pacing in symptomatic sinus node disease, where the symptoms can be clearly attributed to bradycardia. And in acquired AV blocks, the indication for pacing is either a third or a Mobitz 2 block, irrespective of the symptoms. So whenever you see this sort of third degree AV block or Mobitz 2, whether symptoms are there or not, in an acquired AV block, it is a class 1 indication to pace. Class 2A indication will be again in an acquired AV block setting in patient with second degree type 1 AV block, which is again Venki-back AV block, which causes symptoms or is found to be located at intra or an infra-His area after an electro-EPS study is done. It is a 2A indication. And 2B indication will be a sinus node dysfunction, wherein the symptoms are likely due to be the bradycardia, even if the evidence is not conclusive. Means that you are not able to correctly tell that whether the symptoms and that bradycardia are occurring together, but you think that it is more likely because of tachycardia, then it is a 2B indication. So whenever the symptom, whenever a sinus node dysfunction is fully asymptomatic or due to reversible cause, it is a class 3 indication. And again, in an acquired AV block, pacing is not indicated in AV block, which are due to reversible causes. So going into an intermittent bradycardia, which is documented, class 1 indications will be again sinus node dysfunction, including bradytachy syndrome, wherein the patient is having sinus node dysfunction and who are found to have documentation of the symptomatic bradycardia, either due to sinus arrest or sinoatrial block. With respect to intermittent or paroxysmal AV block, including AF with slow ventricular conduction, the class 1 indication is in patients with intermittent or paroxysmal intrinsic third or second degree AV block. In class 2A indications will be reflex asystolic syncope in patients in more than 40 years with recurrent unpredictable reflex syncopes and the documented symptomatic causes due to either a sinus arrest or an AV block or a combination of the AV block and sinus arrest. And with respect to asymptomatic causes, whether it is due to a sinus arrest or an AV block, but you have seen a pass where it may be due to a sinus node dysfunction or an AV block, but it is fully asymptomatic. In that condition, if the patient is having a history of syncope and documentation of asymptomatic causes more than 6 seconds, either due to a sinus arrest or a sinoatrial block or AV block, then still you can go ahead with the pacemaker, which is a 2A indication. But whenever the cause of Brady is reversible, then it is a class 3 indication. You should not go ahead with pacing. In patients with bundle branch blocks, there are 2 class 1 indications, wherein the patient is having a bundle branch block, the patient is having an unexplained syncope and an abnormal EP study. So you're seeing a patient who comes with a history of syncope. You do ECG for the patient is having some bundle branch block, and then so you decide to go ahead with the EP study. So in EP study, if you are finding a HV interval of more than 70 milliseconds or a second or a third degree His-Purkinje block demonstrated during the incremental atrial pacing or with pharmacological challenge, we usually see various protocols during EP study. We would have seen atrial pacing protocols as isoproteinol protocols, which are usually done in our lab during EP study just to stimulate the heart and see for the response, how it conducts and everything. So in case of alternating bundle branch block, whether the patient is having symptoms or not, it is still a class 1 indication to pace. And a class 2B indication will be a patient is again coming with an unexplained syncope. We are doing an ECG, the patient is having bundle branch block, but the diagnosis are, the investigations are non-diagnostic. So in such patients, that's a 2B indication, but an asymptomatic bundle branch block, you will not be pacing. So when the only indication to pace or in a patient with bundle branch block, or the patient should have a history of syncope, then you have to find a bundle branch block and then you have to do an EP study and document abnormality. Or else if the patient is having alternate bundle branch block, whether the patient is having symptoms or not, you can go ahead and pace. With respect to indications for cardiac pacing in patients with undocumented reflex syncope, the class 1 indication is a carotid sinus syncope, wherein, yeah.
1 minute, that previous slide, like any patient with bundle branch block comes with a syncope.
Okay.
Like any class of indication.
You have to do an EP study, man.
Like for every patient who comes with a syncope and has got a bundle branch block, is it necessary we have to do a EP study, or like?
Yeah, definitely. So many cases we do here now. Whenever a patient comes with a syncope, you will be referring to all these what test, man, the tilt table test and all. But whenever a patient is having a documented RBBP or LBBP, you need not even send to this thing, tilt table test and Holter. You can directly do an EP study. So many times when we show such a patient to Bharat sir or Deepak sir, they straight away give dates for EP study.
Okay.
Okay. So, but if it is
why not a Holter?
What is Holter going to tell you?
Why not an exercise test?
Intermittent CHB.
Intermittent CHB is okay, man.
No. If a patient is having a bundle branch block, and he could also be having an intermittent CHB, which is causing the syncope. So Holter is still indicated, in them. It's not like everybody who has a left bundle branch block or right bundle branch block on ECG, if they come with a history of syncope, you'll need to do an EP study directly, right? We can do a Holter. If negative, then probably can consider for.
We can do a Holter, but what I'm telling, even if you are directly taking for EP study, it is still a class 1 indication for pacing.
Okay.
I myself have sent so many patients giving dates without Holter.
Yeah, I know they do, but I wanted to know, like, is it the reason is because Holter?
I don't know whether, I don't know the Holter indication in such a case, but still if you take such a patient without Holter directly to EP study, it is still a class 1 indication.
Okay.
That's what I meant.
Okay.
I think exercise test also same thing, because Manish sir in his class has had explained
Yeah,
same
yeah.
kind of example also.
Yeah, that was actually not a plain bundle branch block. No, that was a bifascicular block wherein you are stressing the third fascicle
Yeah.
to find it whether that is also diseased.
Yeah, yeah. So, but most of the time, like
So
if
LBB,
LBBB
if it
itself
is
is a
LBBB, it's a bifascicular
Yeah.
block. If it is an RBBB, then it is two more fascicles are yet to be proved deficient. Nah.
And Dimpu, that halter, why they may not be doing is because if the syncopes are like infrequent, once in 15 days or somewhere, maybe halter will not give you the result. Maybe that is the reason they will directly take for EP study.
Correct. Probably, yeah.
आज तो वर्षित फोड़ देगा भाई.
15 साल है तो चुप रह.
Don't fight, man. Listen to this. So, going into indications for cardiac pacing in patients with undocumented reflux syncope. So, class 1 indication will be a patient with carotid sinus syncope with dominant cardia inhibitory carotid sinus syndrome and recurrent unpredictable syncope. And with the tilt-induced cardia inhibitory syncope, it is 2B indication in patients with the recurrent frequent unpredictable syncope on patient more than 40 years after alternative therapy. I mean, you are going in with alternative therapies, medical management, everything. And if it fails, then it is a 2B indication still. And patient is not, the pacing is not indicated in a patient with a tilt-induced non-cardio inhibitory syncope. Means you have not documented a cardio inhibitory reflex in that patient. It's a class 3 indication. And in patients with unexplained syncope, means the patient comes with syncope. In that patients, most of it is either class 2B or 3, meaning in class 2B will be like an unexplained syncope and a positive adenosine triphosphate test. So, and in patients with an unexplained syncope and without evidence of bradycardia or conduction disturbances, it is a class 3 indication. And if patient with unexplained falls, it is still a grade class 3 indication for pacing. And in patients after myocardial infarction, means MI, patient in rare cases wherein AV block, patient is having an MI, patient is having an AV block. So even after treatment and everything, AV block is becomes permanent. So cardiac pacing is indicated with the same recommendations as usual, and we follow for PPI. Then if the patient is having, I mean, after resolution of the high degree or a complete AV block, after the MI, you need not pace the patient. Means once the block recovers. And going into indications for pacing after cardiac surgery or transcatheter TAVI or heart transplantation, class 1 indications. Yeah.
Any idea about how long do you want to wait after this thing MI? If it is CHB is not resolving, how long do you wait for?
Actually, for RCA, total RCA have opened. So the typical waiting period will be 14 days, but you can, I mean, I don't know whether it is given somewhere, but BCs
yeah, that is the doubt.
You can wait for
because
2 months.
It is not given anywhere. That is
2 months, man. BCs are used to tell 2 months you can wait. Till 2 months.
Then the TPA will get endotheliase, man.
Yeah, that's what. Hey, most of the time, it's a very rare case. Now, most of the times it recovers. The upper limit, man. Upper limit is not the 2 standard deviation thing. Nah. The most commonly you see will be recovering. So in the unnatural history, if it goes beyond, then how long you can wait if someone asks, it is 2 months. But this I have heard only from BC sir. I have not read it anywhere.
STEMI guidelines says 14 days. 14 days. STEMI guidelines is
14 days is there.
I mean, upper limit itself is 14 days.
Not upper limit. You should start considering pacing after 14 days if it has not recovered.
I mean, upper limit is 2 months. Used to tell.
That is for both anterior and inferior MI.
Just after
anterior wall MI with CHB,
rarely recovers. Rarely recovers.
Yeah,
So
it is like a death sentence only. Infraesian. So, going into post-surgery TAVI or heart transplantation, class 1 indication will be a high degree or a complete AV block after a period of 7 days to assess whether the rhythm disturbances is, I mean, you can wait for 7 days to see whether the rhythm disturbance is resolving. However, in case of complete AV block with low rate of escape rhythm, this observation period can be shortened. I mean, it has to be decided, because most of the times they say recovery is unlikely. So another class 1 indication will be sinus node dysfunction after cardiac surgery and heart transplantation, wherein you can observe for 5 days up to some weeks in order to see whether the rhythm disturbances resolves. And a 2A indication will be a patient with chronotropic incompetence after heart transplantation. Cardiac pacing should be considered for which is patient is having chronotropic incompetence, which is impairing the quality of life late in the post-transplant period. It's a 2A indication. And going into indications of pacing therapy in pediatric patients and congenital heart disease, I think Gaurav was interested in this. So the class 1 indication will be a congenital AV block. Patient is having a high degree and complete AV block in symptomatic patients and in asymptomatic patients also, if they satisfy any of the following risk conditions, which are a patient is having ventricular dysfunction, or patient is having a long QT, or a patient is having complex ventricular ectopies, or patient is having wide QRS escape rhythm, or a ventricular rate less than 50 beats per minute. So the cutoff is 50 beats per minute, and ventricular passes more than 3-fold the cycle length of the underlying rhythm. And another class 1 indication is a post-operative AV block in congenital heart disease, wherein the PPA is indicated for advanced second degree or a complete AV block persisting for more than 10 days after surgery for a congenital heart disease. And in sinus node disease, it is indicated in symptomatic sinus node disease, including tachycardia syndrome, when a correlation between symptoms and bradycardia is actually, if you feel that it is the symptoms and the rhythm disturbance are linked to each other, then it is still a class 1 indication. So class 2A indication will be a post-operative AV block in congenital heart disease, wherein the patient is having asymptomatic post-surgical bifascicular block. It can maybe either with or without PR prolongation associated with a transient complete AV block. Then 2B indications will be in congenital AV block and sinus node disease. In congenital AV block, patient may be considered even if the patient is asymptomatic, but the patient is documented to have a high degree and complete AV block in the absence of above risk conditions. We have told some risk conditions. So patient is having congenital AV block, and if the patient is having symptoms or asymptoms along with these risk conditions, it is class 1 indication. If the patient is completely asymptomatic, but the AV block is documented, but none of the other added risk factors are there, then it is a 2B indication. With respect to sinus node dysfunction, it is maybe PPA may be useful in asymptomatic resting heart rate less than 40 beats per minute, or ventricular passes lasting more than 3 seconds. So going into patients with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, patients, I mean 2A indication will be for a patient in whom there is an indication for an ICD. You are going in for a CRT. Dual chamber ICD. Then it will be a 2A indication. If for a patient with LVOTOs, sequential AV pacing with a short AV interval may be considered in selected patients with either a resting or a provocable LVOTO on drug refractory symptoms who are having contraindication to myomectomy or septal ablation, alcohol ablation, then it is a 2B indication still. And our patient who are at high risk of developing heart block following septal alcohol ablation or septal myomectomy, but they have not defined any criteria to suggest who are at high risk of developing blocks. I think it's a clinical judgment. It will be 2B indication. So on indications for pacing in pregnancy, it's a 2A indication wherein after 8 weeks of gestation, you will be doing whatever, the PPA indications as usual should be considered with echocardiographic guidance, especially in after 8 weeks of gestation in patients who are having symptomatic complete CHB, symptomatic CHB. It's a 2A indication, but it's under echocardiographic guidance, preferably 1 chamber. And so indication for pacing in first degree AV block, it is a 2A indication to put a permanent pacemaker in a patient who is having persistent symptom and still there it's only first degree AV block, similar to those of pacemaker persistent symptoms and attributable to first degree AV block. Means you are having symptoms, you are having first degree AV block, and you are documenting that that symptoms are occurring during periods of first degree AV block. In that case, it is a two-way indication. You can put a pacemaker even for a symptomatic first degree AV block. I have added some pictures. You can go through this. These are actually safety precautions to be taken before patient with a pacemaker or an ICD going into MRI and surgery. So next I will go into some problems with pacemakers. The first will be retrograde atrial activation. It can occur due to any event that uncouples the AV synchrony if VA conduction is intact. So it's most commonly by VPC. Example, if you are having a VPC, this VA conduction means the ventricle to atrial conduction is intact. In that condition, PVC occurs in ventricle, then it gets retrogradely it retrogradely goes back to the atria. So the atria gets depolarized if it's occurring out of its refractory period. As we have seen, during the refractory period, the atrial lead will see the thing, but it will not react to the thing. In blanking period, it will not see only. So if VPC gets tracked back to the atria through a VA connection, then it will depolarize the atria. Then because it has depolarized the atria, then it will start an AV interval. So then it will after the AV interval gets that particular waiting time is over, then ventricle gets stimulated. This will again catch hold of the VA VA connection. It will go back to the atria, and this cycle goes on, and it produces a reentrant tachycardia, which is called as endless loop tachycardia. So basically, when we tell it is pacemaker mediated tachycardia in a dual chamber modes, the two most common or the two common pacemaker mediated tachycardias are endless loop tachycardia and track atrial tachycardia. Track atrial tachycardia, I will tell you what is it. The endless loop tachycardia is just a VPC going through an intact VA connection, coming back through to the ventricle. It's activating, it gives a ventricular beat. Again, actually, the limbs I have noted in this small figure, wherein the ventricle to atrial limb, the VPC goes, catch holds of AV node and reaches the atria. And most commonly, the antegrade path from atrium to ventricle is through the PPI channel. So it forms a loop leading to endless loop tachycardia. So in any atrial if we are going into track atrial tachycardia, so any atrial tachycardia in a patient with a complete AV block, it is sensed by the PPI, and the pacemaker will sense the atrial tachy and starts, because they are dual chamber modes, they start pacing the ventricle at upper rate limit. So this pacemaker mediated tachycardias usually will continue till the atrium gets refractory or the retrograde conduction is lost. So some conditions will be predisposing to pacemaker mediated tachycardia, wherein it is found that more than 30% of patients with AV block, complete AV block means CHB, still can conduct impulses from ventricles to atria. So even inside the AV node, only the anterograde pathway is gone leading to CHB, but the AV node is still conducting of impulses in a retrograde manner. And as we have seen, atrial tachycardia, so atrial ectopics can start the circuit and go into the pacemaker mediated tachycardia. And if the AV interval is long, we have seen Venki response as a safety measure to prevent pacemaker mediated tachycardia. But if the AV interval is not proper, if it is too long, then it can go, one of the beats can go in the non-refractory period, and then it can start a endless loop tachy. And sometimes what this atria does, instead of in the first endless loop tachycardia, we saw VPC as an example. Now instead of VPC, what this atrial lead is doing, the atrial lead is seeing some myopotential. It is thinking as intrinsic potential, and then it starts endless loop tachy. Or it can sometimes be rarely due to undersensing P. This will be in the ventricular loop, loop. So going into treatment of pacemaker mediated tachycardia. So you know that patient is coming. You know that patient is having a pacemaker, and you know that it is a pacemaker mediated tachycardia, but you are not knowing what is the PPA model or the program. What is the program? Because most of the emergencies, this is the case. You know that attender will tell you that the patient is having a pacemaker, but the pacemaker is having the patient is coming with the tachy. You take a ECG and document a pacemaker mediated tachycardia, but you are not knowing the PPA model or program. In such a case, you put a magnet. What will magnet do? Magnet will do, as we have seen, the antegrade pathway is through the PPA lead only. So it will go into an asynchronous VOO mode sort of thing, wherein it will block the anterograde pathway. Or else you can try a carotid sinus massage or a AV block, wherein the these are basically, we have seen that the retrograde path most commonly is due to through the retrograde conducting pathway of inside the AV node only. So with the carotid sinus massage or AV node blocker, you can block the retrograde pathway. So prevention will be by reprogramming only, wherein you can increase the PVARP. PVARP, we have seen it is a post-ventricular atrial refractory period. So you are increasing the your ventricle has given a beat, but because you are increasing the PVARP, this VPC or a sensitive or a paced ventricular beat comes, it catch holds of the retrograde limb, which is the AV node, and goes to atria. But because you have increased the atria refractory period, PVAR, so by the time the impulse reaches the atria, it finds that the atria is still refractory. So that cannot start a endless loop. So the tachycardia will be cut down at the first VPC step only. Or what you can do is you can change there is something called as sensitivity, which you will be setting during our interrogation. So what you can do is you can change the atrial sensitivity to so many millivolts, because usually the retrograde P, which is I have noted as P prime, P dash, it is smaller than the original atrial depolarization. So you can just do and adjust the sensitivity and make it to fall. You can keep a value between the sensitivity, between the value of for a P prime and a P dash, wherein if P prime comes, it will not be deducting. It will be the sense, because you have increased the sensitivity, so that because P prime is smaller, atria will not be sensitive to the retrograde P, but to a normal P, because it has an increased amplitude, it will be still sensing. Or you can reprogram the VBA to DBA. With respect to the tracking atrial tachycardia, the treatment will be, a temporary measure will be magnet, but it has been found that this particular tracking atrial tachycardia will be recurring once you remove the magnet. So that's not a permanent cure. And it has also been found that rate controlling drugs have no impact in tracking atrial tachycardia. So the definitive treatment will be either a DC cardioversion or a pharmacological cardioversion. And you can also inactivate the atrial lead, so that you are abolishing the sensing, because if you are inactivating the atrial lead, then if whatever atrial, because the atrial lead has to sense the atrial tachycardia and send the signal and tell the ventricular lead to pace. But you have inactivated the atrial lead, so it will not see. There is no problem. Whatever tachy runs in atria, ventricle will be pacing at its this only, because atria will not be telling the ventricle to pace, because it has not seen anything. And if the rhythm is atrial flutter, then overdrive pacing has been found to be useful. And in long-term atrial tachycardia, there is also some role of anticoagulation, but no specific criteria or anything I have read. So there is something called as a runaway pacemaker. Runaway pacemaker is actually a medical emergency wherein the rate goes beyond the upper rate limit. So upper rate limit is again a safety measure. We that is the maximum rate at which this pacemaker can pace. So what we think, how much ever the pacemaker is going to pace, I mean, if you set the upper rate limit at 120 or something, you will be thinking that, okay, we have set at 120, so the pacemaker is not going to pace more than 120. But in certain circuit malfunctions, this rate can go above the upper rate limit, means above the safety limit, which is called as runaway pacemaker, which is a medical emergency. But per se, it's rarer with the latest devices and the latest algorithms. And once it used to be happening, then it was found to be increased by radiation. Means runaway pacemakers were more common in if the patient is exposed to radiation. So in this condition, magnet is found to be of no use. And in acute tachy with tachycardia, runaway pacemaker tachycardia, DC cardioversion has been found to be useful. But the definitive treatment is to disconnect the pulse generator. Actually, there is some more topic. There is something called as pacemaker syndrome, which actually I was in duty today. I was not able to read or prepare for it. Maybe during my next topic or something, I will add it. So the next topic will be leadless pacemakers.
Praveen,
yeah.
This thing, both atrial tracking and endless loop tachycardia, both of them will be, the rate will be lesser than the upper rate limit.
No, man. No.
Endless loop tachycardia and track atrial tachycardia, you told, no? In both of them, the rate will be always less than upper rate limit or nothing like that. Because you told once it crosses the upper rate limit, it becomes runaway.
I mean, it will be at the upper rate limit. I mean, mostly I'm thinking it will be at the upper rate limit.
Praveen, do these tachycardias happen in newer generation pacemakers also? Because they
it's very less, man. Very less.
Yeah, because of
most
upper
of
tracking.
Because of what?
Yeah.
PVARP.
Actually, we have told now, because of upper tracking limit rate is basically to limit the tachys.
As soon as even if it is strict, even if your dual chamber pacemaker is going into endless loop tachycardia,
okay,
if that rate is more than upper tracking rate, it will automatically increase.
Then it becomes
PVARP.
a runaway pacemaker, na?
Then it will automatically increase PVARP.
Yeah,
exactly.
actually it will,
and it will go into the Venki backing and twist.
Same thing. Same thing happens in any tachycardia. It will increase the PVARP. What it knows is to increase the PVARP when rate goes up.
PVARP and make it refractory and to break the circuit.
When rate goes above some particular limit.
Okay, only if that PVARP.
Irrespective of mechanism of tachycardia. So in endless loop tachycardia, it will increase the PVARP and it will terminate the tachycardia. When there is a atrial tachycardia going on, it will become intermittent conduction, intermittent pacing.
Okay, only if these algorithms.
Because there are there are tracking algorithms, na, wherein if atrial tachycardia goes on increasing, the P will come inside the TARP and it will initially be a 2:1 and then go into 2:1.
It is not seen in newer generation pacemakers mainly because this PVARP thing.
That's what, not there unless there is circuit malfunction, na.
Unless all that PVARP everything fails, it won't happen, I think. Unless all that circuit malfunction PVARP it fails to get reset, then only all these things can happen.
There is some basic problem with the algorithm. So basically these sort of things are all relative to each other, right? So for a particular loop or a endless loop tachycardia to occur, all those things has to be falling in place, right? The going PVC should meet the atria in a non-refractory period, and it should have a retrograde conducting limb inside the AV block, except AV node and everything. So everything, if it happens, then together, then it will go into tachy. But these days, it's all very, very, very less, unless the algorithm or the circuit malfunction or anything occurs.
And track atrial tachycardia, it can happen with dual chamber only or with single chamber also? It can happen with
these are all dual chamber only, man. But what I have told you, that Venki and 2:1, these are all protective algorithms against this. Okay.
Okay.
Protective mechanisms against this thing. You are increasing P bar means that I have told you, total atrial refractory period is not programmable, but its components are programmable. So most commonly you increase the P bar and make the retrograde P or this thing go inside the refractory period and prevent it from starting the tachy.
Okay.
Praveen.
Yeah.
This one, endless loop tachycardia, if suppose VPC has stimulated the atria, okay, then ventricle will, the pacing lead will sense that atria is paced. So why then it should take part in the loop?
Which one?
This endless loop tachycardia, suppose a VPC has gone retrogradely and stimulated the atrium. So atrium, so the pacemaker, it will sense the atrial beat, no? Then why that lead should take part in that circuit?
What if it is in trigger mode, man?
Okay.
If it is in inhibitory mode, that's what, man, for these things to occur, so many things has to fall in place. Only if everything falls in place and make that all the conditions viable, then it will start.
Not so many, only two conditions. Only two conditions has to be there. One, the ventricle should be able to conduct to the atria retrogradely. That is one. Second, that after the conduction has happened to atria, that should happen after the P bar.
Yeah.
Then only endless loop tachycardia will happen. These are the only conditions which are supposed to be there for endless tachycardia to happen.
That's what, man. So your main aim is to bring that retrograde P inside the refractory period. So only increasing the P bar and making that retrograde P fall inside the TARP.
Yeah.
So, Varshit, clear?
I don't know. Varshit's doubt was something else only.
No, this one only. This one only.
Yes. Varshit is clear.
Clear. Okay.
So, yeah, tell man.
Before you move on, I just wanted to know, does anyone have any idea how do you decide the pacing rate in children? Like how much do you
pacing
rate in children?
ये क्या भाई तुम pediatric join करने वाले हो क्या? सारे
children
patient पूछते हो यार.
If I want,
वो pediatric join कर रहा है भाई अगले 3 महीने के बाद.
For this only we have took MD general medicine, man, to avoid all this. You are again going into.
I'm in general asking because
you join pediatric, help in India, man.
Hey, one thing I know, for pediatrics the rate is more. They keep it around 90 to 100. I have not read it somewhere, but each pediatric pacemaker case which I have interrogated or which I have seen or done, it will be around 90 to 100.
Okay.
And there is something called as when the patient grows, because they keep on decreasing the rate. This much only I know, but I don't know for which age, which rate, that and all I don't know. One thing is they start at 100 and come down slowly. Maybe once in 2 years or something, they decrease by 10. So by adolescence, it will be reaching 60 or 70.
Okay.
So we'll go into leadless pacemakers now. Actually, I think I have added American guideline. No, okay. I will add and re-upload American guidelines also, pacemakers. So going into leadless pacemakers, what is the need for leadless pacemakers? This is just to avoid the problems with lead pacemakers and the vascular entry problems. The most commonly seen problems are venous thrombi, which has been documented in up to 5% of the cases, and it can lead on to pneumothorax in 0.8 to 1.6%, pocket infection in 1.4, erosion hematoma in 3.5 to 5%. Pocket infection can also land up in sepsis. It can be associated with the lead fractures. And if any thrombi forms on the lead and if there is a PFO, then it can go into stroke. Okay, and because of the lead and everything, it can go into tricuspid regurgitation. Nowadays we are seeing that most of the many tricuspid regurgitation are iatrogenic because of these implanted leads and devices, and might be associated with the fibrosis and difficult removal of the leads. So the indications for leadless pacemakers are again same as PPI, but the problem will be with cost, especially in our setting. I think it costs around 9, 10, 12 lakhs something. So basically the leadless pacemakers are divided into single component pacemakers and multi-component pacemakers. So single component pacemaker, what they do is all the parts of the pacemaker, the battery, electronics, electrode, sensors and everything, they are compressed inside a small capsule, and it is delivered by a deflectable sheath. So the advantages of such a single component pacemaker, it is very easy to implant. It is very simplistic in design, and it has greater energy efficacy. Actually, I have added this. There are two two available. Means the NanoStim is already withdrawn. Micra is still available, which we even in EP Live they had shown the implantation of one Micra device. So these are the devices available. NanoStim is withdrawn now. NanoStim is from St. Jude and Micra is from Medtronic. So the problem with this leadless pace, that single component pacemakers, are that we have to think once the battery gets over, what to do with removal. But nowadays, what they are telling is, with the example with Micra device, the volume of Micra device is only 1/50th of the volume of RV. So you can leave that when once the battery gets over, you can leave off that Micra there only, then put a new Micra device. Even if the patient is going to live for some 35, because the average lifespan of a pacemaker is around 10 years. So even if he is going to have even if you want to cover some 40-50 years, he'll be still having some 4 or 5 Micras inside the RV. But the total volume of RB is 1/50th. But we don't have, and the other disadvantages, we don't have any much experience with regard to how much thrombi it causes, or how much emboli it causes, or what about the infection rates. So as I have told you, the two systems available are Micra and NanoStim from Medtronic and St. Jude respectively. NanoStim is withdrawn because of some docking button problems. So the difference between Micra and NanoStim I have written here. So basically Micra is the sheath used is a 24 French. For NanoStim it is 18 French. The fixation mechanism also it's different. With Micra it is nitinol tines, which is a passive fixation. In NanoStim it is active helix. It will be an active screw in sort of thing, wherein you have to fully rotate the delivery system to make it actively fixed into the RV. The size will be, Micra is a little bit smaller. The volume is 8.8 centimeter cube. For NanoStim it is 1 centimeter cube. So diameter wise, Micra is larger. So only you are using a larger sheath for Micra. And longevity for Micra is around 10 years, 9.6 years to be exact. And the NanoStim has a longevity of 14.7 years. And the Micra also uses something called as auto capture technology, wherein lower energy pacing pulses are used to extend the longevity. And with respect to follow-up also, the Micra and the NanoStim differs. Micra uses a radio frequency telemetry, wherein it can be done over wireless technology, so that you can even have a daily alert for the data of the pacemaker. But for NanoStim it is a conductive telemetry, wherein the patient has to come to the hospital. You have to put the patch like a magnet or something, then you can know the data of the pacemaker. But comparatively it uses less battery drainage. Weight wise both are same, it is 2 grams. And the rate response, yesterday Gautam was asking now how the rate response works. So Micra uses accelerometer and NanoStim uses temperature. So whenever you exercise, the temperature increases and rate response gets activated, and the pacemaker starts pacing at a faster pace. And the battery used is lithium silver vanadium oxide and carbon monofluoride in Micra and lithium carbon fluoride in NanoStim. And the implantation success for both, it is more than 95%, and major complications occur in 4 to 6.5%, and perforation or effusion occurs in 1.5%. The main study based on which Micra came is the Micra TPS global clinical trial. It is a single arm study actually, wherein some historical controls from pacemakers, 6 pacemaker trials were used as control. In that particular study, the implant success was 99.2% with a median implant time of 28 minutes. And the major complication occurred in 4% of the patients. The most common being perforation or tamponade, followed by cardiac failure, groin side complications, and AV fistulas. And I've already told you that the RV volume is so big comparatively, so you need not remove the pacemaker. You can just put in a new pacemaker. But if you want to remove the pacemaker, then there is something called as a posterior docking button, wherein with the removal device you can go into it, lock with the docking device, and then take it back. You can remove it. And it has also been found that earlier the removal, it is more successful removal, because as we have known, once it becomes chronically implanted into RV, fibrosis and everything sets in, so you can't remove the pacemaker. But the problem with this leadless pacemakers are, for now, only single chamber pacemakers are available. And in case if the patient needs CRT, these sort of pacemakers, these are disadvantages. So if the patient needs CRT, these leadless pacemakers cannot be used. And if the patient is having an IVC filter or a mechanical tricuspid valve, better not to use leadless pacemakers. And as I already told you, rate responsiveness is still possible with leadless pacemakers, but the embolism risk and thrombosis risk, we don't have an idea till now. There is something called as multi-component leadless pacing. So wherein there is something called as a seed which is implanted into the RV chamber RV or LV. So it acts as an energy transducer, and there will be a separate extrathoracic machine which acts as the energy source. So it will be having two components. One component is implanted into the LV, and one more component is either kept somewhere or implanted subcutaneously, wherein it acts as an energy source. The WISE, one system which is available is the WISE CRT system, which is made up of polyester covered titanium, and it is implanted endocardially into the LV. It is basically a CRT system, and it has a subcutaneous pulse generator. So in this particular system, the second that energy source is a subcutaneous pulse generator, which is put in the subcutaneous plane in the left lateral thorax, and it uses ultrasound pulses. So this WISE CRT system is based on the WISE CRT study, where the patients already having a PPA or an ICD, this left ventricular seed was added to them, where the patient was having a failed coronary sinus lead implantation during upgradation to CRT, or a CRT non-responders or CRT upgrade needed patients. So in those sort of patients, the WISE CRT system was put in. But what they have found out, that 18% of the patients developed pericardial effusions. So that the study was stopped for a while. Then they have redesigned the delivery system. Then it was found to have not so increased pericardial effusions, so it was continued. So the advantages of this system is that you can select the site of pacing, because while doing a CRT, there is a chance that the response will be varying. Suppose if you place the CRT LV lead in middle cardiac vein, the response will be different. So with each vein, the response will be different. But in this system, you can, because you are seeding in the LV, while putting in only, you can just select the site of implantation. And it can also decrease mitral regurgitation, and it can also decrease unnecessary phrenic nerve stimulations. But the disadvantages being, we are still very less in experience to comment about the energy efficacies, because most of the time it has been found to be that the energy delivered is so inefficient to cause stimulation or something. And there is something called as chronic zonification, wherein the studies of a long-term ultrasound effect on the myocardium has also to be thought of. And it's also been associated with early battery depletion. So we don't have a just with Micra and NanoStim, we can tell that if you put in a Micra, you can go ahead for 10 years, and if it put in a NanoStim, we can go ahead for some 14.7 years. But with the YCRT system, till now that particular longevity figure is not known. And the latest some 2 or 3 things which I want to know, I mean, you just know that these things are happening. The one thing is that they are replacing the ultrasound pulses with magnetic induction, so that the efficacy will be more. And there are something called as batteryless pacemakers. So what they are doing is they are converting the myopotentials from cardiac or skeletal muscle or lung movements and everything. So they are deriving energy from that movement, and they are converting that energy, and in turn they will be stimulating the heart and using it to fuel the pacemaker. So there is something called as piezoelectric nanowires which are used for this. And using gene therapy, what they are doing is they are trying to add the contractile components through gene therapy, so that the contractile components and everything is increased, and it will again in turn help with better contraction. So I'm just adding some figures at the end, the components of a pacemaker and NanoStim Micra devices. And I also added the fixation mechanisms, as I have already told in the first starting. The various passive fixation mechanisms and active fixation, helix and are all available. So these are the fixation mechanisms. So that's all. I mean, the end.
Praveen.
Yeah.
This leadless pacemaker will be technically easier, no? Compared to the...
Yeah, it's very easy, man. You just go in. I mean, the problem will be with the sheath. Okay. Once you have tackled the sheath problem and reached RV, it's just go in, see a site, put out, come back. And while actually, I mean, in EP Live we saw first what they did, they implanted it at one place. Then they even showed how to go with the dock button. They tried to take out the pacemaker. I mean, take out means from that particular site and inserted it somewhere. I mean, in another trabecular or something. Okay. So it's very easy to deliver, man.
And only single chamber pacing will be done, no? With this.
Yeah. That's the main disadvantage.
Okay. And YCRT is placed in chamber or extra thoracic?
That's what meant. That is a multi-component pacing. Na? One component you will be implanting inside the LV, which will be acting as that LV lead of CRT.
Pacement.
And one more extra cardiac energy source will be there, which will be implanted subcutaneously.
Okay.
So and this will give an energy, that seed will receive it and stimulate the heart.
From that subcutaneous, the leads will be there to LV coronary.
No leads will be there. No.
Only ultrasonic. Only ultrasonic based.
Yeah,